All right, this is Listen to Tony with me, Anthony Ulanski. Today's guest is Jing-Jing Hu, former political and security risk analyst turned software engineer. So, after graduating from the University of Oxford and obtaining a Master of Science in Global Governance and Diplomacy, she spent about 3 years in politics and policy field in London and Beijing. And during the pandemic, she used their organizational and communication skills to teach herself how to code and get a job as an engineer within 6 months of leaving her previous jobs. Fucking impressive. Now you're onto some building something new. Before we get into all that and your story, when I asked you whether you'd like to come on to the podcast, you there was like 5 or 10 seconds of silence, and you said yes. Like I really don't want to do this, but I'll do it because it's something that I don't want to do. What is that about? Like getting out of your comfort zone, or?
Yeah, well, I like to try like everything, and honestly, I think like anything like public like filming or like podcast and so on is actually outside of my comfort zone, or at least like I haven't really done it a lot. But what I always say to myself is, I mean, at the end of your life, no one's going to remember your life as well as you do. So you gotta live it like and to the fullest extent possible and try everything. Because for me, that's like what life is about like trying
What's the
everything.
craziest thing you've tried?
The craziest thing I've tried. Whew, good question. Well, I once jumped out of a plane as part of a static line jump. So I had a weekend of training in case of like emergency, in case your parachute doesn't work and so on. And then I just jumped out of the plane.
Alone.
And yes, alone.
What is static line jump in comparison to just skydiving?
So you basically do static line jumps to learn how to skydive and obtain a license. Whereas like a lot of people when they do skydiving, they go with a person who has learned how to do it. And static line jump, it just means that you are attached to a static line, and that releases the parachute once you jump out of the plane. And so you're on your own basically with like.
But still attached to the plane with one little line.
No, the line it basically releases the parachute, and you're on your own, and that is why you have a weekend of training because what you're basically supposed to do is you wait 10 seconds, you count to 10, you look up, and then you check for any errors in your like anything that is wrong with your parachute, and then it's like if there's anything wrong, you have like I mean, I think like seconds or minutes to like fix it or release your emergency parachute because it does happen that there's something wrong with the first one or it's not released, and so you then need to like release the emergency parachute, otherwise you die. But they told us that no one had ever died on the premises before. Just almost like there was one person who was so shocked that his parachute wasn't like released that he froze, and they basically kept like shouting into the walkie-talkie or whatever it was.
So the parachute didn't release itself because like there was some malfunction in the whole setup, and then he froze because he felt like there's nothing he can do.
He was basically just probably just shocked because it was the first time he was doing it, right? And then but then apparently he did it like last minute because they kept shouting into his ear to do it. But yeah, that's like the risk you take. But yeah, I didn't really tell my parents that I was doing it until after, because I knew that they wouldn't want me to do it.
You know that movie with Jim Carrey, Yes Man? Like he just kind of says his life is like he's not happy with his life, and so he goes to this one conference, some guru, and he says you have to say yes to everything, and your life is gonna transform itself. Are you that type of person where you suddenly had that transformation, and you thought, okay, I want to get out of my comfort zone now? Is that part of it? Like you also becoming a software engineer, or?
Good question. I mean, my reasons for becoming a software engineer, I mean, there's a whole story behind
Yeah, we can
it.
get back to that
But
later. Yeah.
I have to say that I loved reading Carol Dweck's Mindset. That was one of my favorite books. That is one of my favorite books, actually, about like growth mindset and like developing one or having one in all areas of your life. And then another thing that has really like inspired me or influenced me is a TED talk that I attended Back in uni, it was the founder of the World Toilet Organization. They call themselves WTO, and it's like a bit of a joke. But he basically said something along the lines of he really thinks that the people who are not afraid to make a fool of themselves are the ones who are going to go the furthest in life. And I thought about it, and I was like, and I think that there's some truth to it, because if you're not afraid to make a fool out of yourself, you basically, you care less about what other people think. You just do it, even if other people like laugh or like disagree with you and whatever. And to go against that like natural need for approval and like belonging and just do your thing. I really do think that
it is a natural feeling though, right? Like this belonging, or I mean, I don't know, belonging, yes, but also just staying in your lane, kind of like, and what other people think about you versus, hey, no one really cares. Like, do you actually care about other people yourself?
Wait, if I care about other people,
yeah,
about
in a sense, like, yeah. I mean, yeah, but you don't really. If someone goes up there on stage and makes a fool out of themselves, you're gonna be like, oh, like I really hate this person now, or like they really stress me out with this one. You're just gonna be, oh, I feel sorry for them, or like they should really get some, advice in terms of their public speaking skills or something like that.
Yes, but I also admire them, like when people go on stage or do something, even if they don't do it well or if they like fail at it in some way, I still think that it's brave to have tried, and I think that's like part of the reason why I started improv, right? Because improv is teaching me that as well. It's a bit like if you stumble, make it part of the dance. Just pretend, that you did it on purpose, and I think that really helps.
Or what role, or like, how was it growing? Because your parents are Chinese, right? But you grew up in Germany.
Yeah, so my parents, they were born in China, but they grew up in the Netherlands. Yeah, they went to school there and everything, and then they moved to Germany. So they also speak Dutch, and funny enough, like Mandarin, I only learned later in life because my parents are also not native Mandarin speakers actually. But we do have like a Chinese dialect from the town that my parents are from, or city or whatever. Yeah.
Cool. Wait, so you speak their dialect? You speak Mandarin? You speak Dutch?
I speak German, English, obviously, Mandarin, Chinese dialect. I can understand everything in Dutch. Only speak a bit because we're basically raised by our grandparents, and my parents were not like at home a lot when we were younger. But my family, like the majority of my family, is actually in the Netherlands, and my family actually emigrated to the Netherlands first. Like, it was my great grandfather's brother, I think, who went to the Netherlands, and that's why how my parents ended up in the Netherlands as well.
How is it being, because like in the US it's like a melting pot, but here in Europe it's a bit less so, meaning, or what I'm trying to say, when you go to a store, do people usually start talking to you, even though you're a native, like you're a fluent German speaker, people start talking to you in English immediately? Because
oh my god, so many thoughts about this. But like in my hometown, they don't. I think that's it's partly because
your hometown?
Leimen. It's like near Heidelberg. It's like where Boris Becker grew up, actually.
Who's Boris Becker?
A tennis player that no one cares about anymore, but like a famous tennis player actually. And fun fact, I actually learned how to play tennis in the same club as he did. But yeah, in Leimen. But I think that
was he your teacher, or did he fund the school, or was he a big prominent figure in your community?
Not really. I mean, people knew him, but obviously he wasn't around because he was playing tennis all over the world.
And he made his money and probably never fucking came back because.
Yeah, basically, I think he came to visit once or so, but I never met him. I just know that his grandma lived there at the time as well and whatnot. But no, I've never like met him or like his family members or anything. Yeah.
Okay. But going back to the question, so in your hometown, no one kind of notices. I'm asking because I was told by a little bird that you're part of this community, Two Hearts Tech something community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I checked out the website quickly. You want to say what it is and why you ended up there?
Yeah, it's basically a community of people with like different cultural backgrounds that work in tech, and it's to like help each other and like foster diversity in the tech sector or encourage people with diverse backgrounds. And yeah, but like going back to the question, I think the reason is I basically grew up there, and most people in that town, I don't think they speak English very well, to be honest, even if they wanted to. I don't think that, yeah, it's just they speak German by default and expect you to do that too. In Berlin, on the other hand, it's different, where people do sometimes talk to me in English, even though I'm like speaking German. But sometimes it's not because they think that I can't speak German, but it's because they don't speak German, which has never happened to me before, like in Germany. True. Before moving to Berlin. Yeah.
Is there, because you said like your great uncle or something, like they moved to, like they've been in like Europe. Do you feel European?
Wow, that's a very, oh my gosh, too many big existential questions.
Because I always, you know, because you see this on the news, and I'm yeah, kind of, and now I have you, so I can just ask you, right?
Yeah.
But like, how is it so? Because it's way easier to integrate yourself into a society like the one in the U.S. where kind of everyone is from somewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas like, I mean, also I would probably never feel like I'm from China if I moved to China, right? Or like I've you know, I grew up in certain countries where like it was obvious I'm not from there, and people treat you differently.
Yeah.
Just because you look differently. Is it like being like, do you think this feeling is present also in Europe, or it's not there anymore?
Which feeling?
Of like not necessarily, or like that you can totally ingrain yourself into society. There's this whole like issue, for example, in France, right, where you have these like fourth generation people from like came from Algeria, and they don't really, or like there's this thing of like, oh, like can we kind of breach every, can we get to any type of place we want to get into this society and be treated equally and in the same way as like a white person would be?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So people have often asked me like, Ching, like what do you identify as? And I tend to say European Chinese or European Asian. But I rarely say, or I say like German born Chinese, but I keep telling people that I view myself more as a, like culturally, I think that I'm more European with like Chinese influences, but I don't say like German or Dutch, just because my family is like quite like multicultural, and like that my parents grew up in the Netherlands, and like we went there like quite often when I was like younger.
What do your parents do?
My parents, so they used to have a restaurant. They built up like a restaurant, then they had another one, and so on. And it's also like a story. But like most of my family members, they have a restaurant or like a hotel.
Are you into that? Or do you like cooking, or?
No, it's funny. People like, that's also a question people often ask when I mention restaurant. But like I like always compare, like imagine your dad had a hospital. Doesn't mean that you know how to like like do surgery. Same with like cooking, because they tend to do the operational side of things and like manage it and so on. But my mom, for example, she can't cook. And it's like other people who do that.
I assume that they were also cooking, because like if you told me your parents are doctors, like I could assume that, oh, like maybe you want to be a doctor, so, or at least because there are a lot of people who kind of follow the steps of their parents, especially in the medical field. But yeah, fair point. Like if they're running the restaurant, have you ever worked like at a restaurant or like helped manage the place yourself, or?
Yes, actually. I was a waitress at my parents' restaurants, because they had like two at the time. Usually during the weekends or New Year's, Christmas, busy times. And there was even one day when my parents were away and they wanted me to take care of the restaurant. So yes, I have. But it's a very, very tiring job. You have to be there like 24/7 unless you have a manager, but it's also tricky to find like a manager that you trust. Eventually they had one, but it is a very tiring business, because you're basically moving like 24/7.
Yeah. how did you end up studying government and policy? And was your dream becoming a politician or?
Oh my gosh. Good question. So basically, to be completely honest,
Only
I
honesty. Yeah.
I had no idea what I wanted to be because my grades at school were good, like across like all subjects. Okay, I'm not that's true, and I had like I was generally
What did you say
interested.
wanted to be versus wanted to do?
Hmm?
What did you say wanted to be versus wanted to do?
Good question. I guess it's because I thought about it that way, that whatever you choose to do, it also becomes like a big part of your identity. And yeah, but like I had a genuine interest in like all subjects. There was nothing that did not interest me, like from chemistry to physics to I even chose the natural sciences, but I love languages, I love writing, I love like art, I love like sports. It was super, super difficult for me, but then I thought about it, and I thought about studying psychology or neuroscience, but I didn't know what I could do with it. So I really thought about it, like the things that I really care about and what kind of impact I want to make. And I was always looking abroad, like I always wanted to study abroad, and I wanted to have an international career. That is something I was sure of. And so then I thought
Just because like your parents were also had an international background, or like what was the thinking behind having an international career?
Yeah, because my family is like quite like international, and I enjoy this like kind of environment, and I love like meeting people. So when I was 16, I went to the States for a 2-week school exchange, and that was like
Which state?
Florida.
Nice. Miami or?
Tampa, near Tampa.
My aunt
It
lives
was
there. Yeah, it's
near,
nice.
yeah, near Wikiwachi, but yeah, I keep telling people that it was like Central High, but they told me like every other high school in the States is called Central High. So yeah, but yeah, I really enjoyed the experience, and yeah, people were more like multicultural and international there than like in that town that I was from. And yeah, because of my parent, like my family, like we have like family members in like France and Italy and like the Netherlands and so on. And I always wanted to contribute to intercultural relations because of that. And that kind of like moved me in the direction of politics. But I didn't just want to study politics. So I chose like politics, philosophy, and economics because I wanted to study as much as possible. To be honest,
liberal arts education.
oh,
Eclectic.
I would have loved that, to be honest, but it's not that common in Europe. Yeah, but going to the States, I thought was like too far, and also I missed the deadline for like applying because you need to actually like do the SAT alongside your like final exams and so on, and it was just too
So
much.
where did you go to college? Germany, or because you went to Oxford?
Yeah,
right?
For my master's, and for my bachelor's, I went to Manchester.
Whoa, how was that?
It was nice. And I also did an exchange semester in Canada. It was funny because I was already studying abroad, and then I was studying abroad whilst I was studying abroad. But yeah, Manchester was nice. Yeah, also very multicultural.
But were you driven like because you start your studies and you're doing philosophy, politics, economics, and did one kind of pull you towards like a certain direction, or you were still after 4 years of your bachelor's or 3 years, you're still undecided, or were you part of like any association of like are you becoming political, or you think I want to be a public servant and be a diplomat?
Yeah, I wanted to be a diplomat actually, but
it's Germany.
That's funny because I didn't have German nationality back then. My parents wanted us to have the Dutch one, so I started out with the Dutch one and actually only got my German nationality this year. But I always thought like, oh, I can work for the European Union and so on, or for an international organization. So that was the thought behind it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's also a whole like citizenship story there, but like I'm not gonna go into that. But yeah, I did like Model United Nations, and like, do you know ISAC?
It rings a bell.
Yeah, it's also like a student organization. They organize like exchanges and so on. And what else? Like, yeah, skydiving. I did the British Red Cross thing. A lot of like volunteering as well. tried a lot of things
But you're
overall.
still open-minded, like you still kind of are into everything almost. At some point, like you gotta zero in, or like what happened after you graduated? Did you just grab any job that was out there, or?
So I wanted to go in the like politics direction, and I think in my second year of university or so, I did like an internship at the UK civil service, like the UK government, and
You can just do that, like even not being from there.
you can like you at least like at the time you could do that as a EU citizen.
I know it was before
Um,
Brexit.
yeah, that was before Brexit. I'm not sure what the situation is now. But yeah, I did that, and I wanted to go in the politics direction because it interested me. But to be honest, I wasn't sure what it was going to look like because I didn't know anyone working in the field. And then, yeah, after my bachelor's, for me in my head, for some reason, it was always like bachelor's, master's. It's only then that my education is done. And I think it's because
Why though?
I think it's because my parents didn't go to university, so they placed a lot of. I mean, it was important for them that we
So you
went to
want to do it all
university.
in?
Yeah, but also I had like I think my cousins, like my Dutch cousins, were the ones who went to university first, and for them it was also like bachelor's and masters, and yeah, I am not 100% sure to be honest, but I thought okay, you know, with a master's you will have more opportunities and so on. I also googled a lot and I read up about it, but like in hindsight, I'm not sure it's like that important to have a master's. It really depends on what you want to do, right? But if you don't know what you want to do, it might make sense to have a master's.
It's probably also like where do you do the masters and who do you surround yourself with? Like, I assume like doing a master's, another 2 years at the university or at Manchester, like probably wouldn't have added as much value as if you going to Oxford, right? Because
Yeah,
different university, also I presume more prestigious, right?
mm-hmm.
And so also the caliber of people who go there,
Definitely.
maybe a little bit higher slash different. So yeah, how
Different, yeah, for
did you?
sure.
But did you go straight from like Manchester? You did some like summer break, pack your bags, and went to Oxford, or?
I spent the summer between my bachelor's and my master's traveling in Southeast Asia. I went to Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. Where else did I go? I think those were the countries that I went to. Yeah,
Alone or with friends?
with my cousin. Yeah.
Anything like going back to you kind of saying yes or like getting out of your comfort zone? Anything happen over there that
Anything. I just think
you had a
that
ping pong show or
da-da-da-dum. I mean, it was very different, but like I don't know. I love animals and I love watching animal videos, but I had no idea how like scary like an elephant could be. I mean they're cute,
yeah?
but once they stand in front of you and you realize they can literally lift their foot and like just kill
Yeah.
you.
How close did you get?
Huh?
How close did you get?
Super close. So we didn't do any of those like things where you like ride the elephant. We went to like an area that's supposed to be like more like natural. We basically went into the wilderness to like see them. And yeah, I was like super close to the elephant, like close enough to like see or feel the hair on their skin. So that's how close went. But yeah, it just makes me think of that like one picture I have sitting next to the elephant. It looks like I'm super happy, but like what people don't know is that like a couple of like minutes afterwards, I was basically like walking away, like running away from it because I was like because it scared me. But
Mm.
yeah, but yeah.
How's Oxford? Because like almost every prime minister, right, the UK and I guess
Mm-hmm.
some other countries like
Mm-hmm.
has gone there. Like, did you feel that you are in this? It kind of like some people compare to Hogwarts, and I mean I've never been, so I don't know.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
how was
yeah.
it for you? And also speaking of the people who did you meet anyone that kind of drastically changed how you look at the world, or?
Very good question. Um, so I would describe Oxford as intellectually intense, because everyone who goes there, like even if you know nothing about them, you know that they're academically accomplished, that at least. So like the level of like discussions or debates that you're having even over lunch and so on is can become like very intense.
For example, like what can you argue over lunch with like a bunch of 20-year-olds?
Oh my gosh, all kinds of like political issues, political philosophy, literature, all kinds of things. But it's also because I went to St. Anthony's College, and everyone there basically has a social science background. Like it's a graduate college, and so most people they either study like regional studies, like Latin American studies, or Asian studies, something like that, or like global governance and diplomacy, or international relations, international development. So with everyone having like a similar, a similar interest, the conversations naturally tend to like move in that direction. Yeah, but to be honest, I mean, I found the people quite interesting, but some people were also a bit like eccentric, or like like different from how I would have imagined. And also, to be honest, in the beginning, I also felt a bit not out of place, but like it's just like such a bubble, like intellectual bubble that you're in. And I was not used to that, and also it was such a contrast to like the life I went back to when I went home to visit like my parents, at the restaurant, or like the people, and like
you like an underdog, like you kind of
a little bit, I think. Yeah.
And so was there a professor or your tutor or someone who really inspired you? Did you have some kind of role model or someone who really kind of set your mind in a way that you, for example, started caring about XYZ issue?
Wow.
Because at some point you build up some like passion, or maybe you don't, I don't know. But like, say you're 2 years at Oxford, right? Like you're surrounded by all these people who have so many opinions. Uh, did someone like kind of like sway you? Did you join some, I don't know, like club or political party or?
Well, I did join the Oxford Union, which is basically about like listening to like debates and so on. That was quite interesting.
Did you debate yourself? Did you debate yourself?
No, I didn't. But in terms of like role models, to be honest, I first of all I was only there for like a year for the masters.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. But like within that year, I think it was more like my peers that inspired me, because a lot of them were like super ambitious. A lot of them also like very accomplished, but also that like there were several people who were like not just like academically smart, but also like socially smart. Had a lot of like projects going on, or like active in like sports, and like excelled like in several areas in life, which I thought was super cool. But like I don't think there was like any like one person where I would say like, oh wow, that like this person really like changed me, to be honest.
Okay, got it. So when you were graduating, you at some point like, because I know this feeling of kind of being Peter Pan, of like everything is ahead of you, you can do whatever the fuck you want on this planet.
Yeah.
But school's over. Like what do you do? Like what kind of, having a few internships, how do you make the decision of, okay, I just have to apply, I need to do something in order to not only make some money, but also just you said like it was a question of like not what do you want to do, but who do you want to be. Did you start kind of thinking about, or like having an idea of who do you want to be, or was it just like, okay, first job, grabbing it, let's go?
I did spend a lot of time thinking about it, but then I also realized, when you just finish university, even if you went to like a prestigious school like Oxford, for example, it's not like you can pick and choose. You still, it's like the politics and policy space is like very competitive, because I far like
so it's not like you just wave your Oxford degree and everyone's like, come work for me.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, I applied to like different like international organizations, NGOs as well, and so on. I just wanted to get my foot in the door first to see where it would take me, and also because at that point, like I had only seen like the civil service in the UK, but like hadn't seen like much else, like in terms of like actually the real life in terms of like politics and policy. So yeah, and then I eventually ended up in Beijing because I got this opportunity to work for this like think tank that I thought was super cool. It's like U.S. think tank in like
What is a
China.
think tank?
A think tank.
It's
Okay.
good to see like a tank thinking. No, I'm kidding. But like, it's a weird name, right? Like, I kind of know what it is. Like, it's some
Yeah.
sort of like you said, it's an NGO,
Yeah.
and they probably do a lot of thinking. But like,
Yeah. So basically, they have like scholars or like former policymakers and so on that produce like so it depends on the topic, but that one was focused on U.S.-China relations, for example, and you had a lot of like U.S. and Chinese scholars who wrote like papers about like political issues, but also
it's like a newspaper kind of, or like a department at the university just like produces a lot of papers, but it's not part of a university.
It's comparable. I mean, it's supposed to establish like a link between like the policy world, academic world, and like ordinary citizens. But we actually had this discussion back then that it actually sometimes like fails to reach like people like you and me, like on the streets. I mean, because it's like still like very like academic. But what they also do like is like events like on like political topics, but also
Like meetups, like there's some speaker come over.
yeah, and like fireside chats, like round tables and so on, like both like closed door and like open to the public. And because I was like working there, like I could listen to the conversations, like I mean to the closed door events as well. But it's very interesting because being there, like yeah, I mean observing like the policy people, but also like interacting with some of them, you realize how different the Chinese and the Americans really are, and like, I mean that yeah, it's just very interesting.
How was that though? Like speaking of when you got to China, did you feel like you're an outsider, or did you feel like I'm home? Did people treat you differently? Did you see they say, oh, this German or Dutch girl, or it was just like, hey, like we probably went to the same high school. I just had to remember your name.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. For me, I felt like a foreigner, but I blended in quite like easily because I look Chinese, so no one really noticed me on the streets and so on. That was really nice, that like feeling of like, oh, just like blending in and fitting in, at least like from the outside. I had like a family friend there who helped me to get like set up and like with a lot of things in the beginning because I had to refresh my Mandarin as well. Because up until that point, I mean, I spent some summers in Shanghai, but I never really like lived in Beijing, like or like in China properly before that. Um, and yeah, but funny enough, a lot of Chinese people they didn't believe me when I said that I was from. I mean, they could hear that I am not like a Mandarin like native speaker, but they thought I was like from Hong Kong or like some other like where they have like an accent. And I still remember at one point I was like I think in Chengdu or like traveling within China, and I took a cab, and the cab drivers in China, they love making conversation. So he asked me, so Miss, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Germany. And he started laughing. He was like, no, you're not. And I was like, yes, I am. And he was like, no. Like, he was like, come on, like, tell me. And I was like, I'm from Germany. And he just didn't believe me. And then when we arrived at the destination, he said to me, he looked at me, he said like, come on, miss, like we're probably never going to see each other again. You can tell me the truth. Where are you from? And I said, I'm from Germany, like for real. And he said like, and he just shook his head like, and I closed
spat on the floor.
kind of, and then drove off. And that was another moment when I was with like some international friends, but also some Asian looking, some like Western looking. And one of my friends, he said like, okay, this person is from Australia, this person is from the UK, this person is from like wherever, and like he pointed at me. And he said, this girl is from Germany. And he, again, the waiter, he was like, no, she's not from Germany, she's from China. And I said, I just like,
that's what I meant. That's what I meant with my question at the very beginning, right? Like
yeah.
being like in Europe and growing up in Europe, because like it's the same thing where probably like sometimes people think like I'm German here, even though it's like I'm white, but that's it. So that's why I thought like you're way more German than I am. Like you grew up here, that's your country.
Yeah.
yet still we have like this lens of like a race, I guess, right?
Definitely.
That's what I meant in the very beginning when I was asking these questions, because it's probably fucking hard, like kind of in terms of just like the identity part. Like you want to feel like you're from here, like I was born here, like I speak the language, I've watched the same cartoons, went to the same schools.
Mm,
Yet when I'm in China, people don't fucking believe me, and here probably also a lot of people don't believe me that I'm German either. Maybe not, but
yeah.
like, um,
Yeah, it is true. It's because like my family doesn't really follow any like traditions like close. I mean, like there's some like I mean we
no
ate
firecrackers for Chinese New Year's.
no, we actually didn't celebrate Chinese New Year. I didn't had no idea how important it was until I moved to China, and then
Mm,
I realized, oh my God, it's like the thing, you know, the like New Year's for us. And like yeah, but we didn't really like celebrate it, and we ate Chinese food at home. We sometimes like. I mean, in kindergarten or like in school, we would like follow some like German traditions because like everyone else did, right? But then I like when people ask me about like German traditions or Chinese traditions, to be honest, sometimes I get confused because I don't know about like I don't necessarily know about all like the traditions that like Germans follow or like the Chinese follow. I'm somewhere in the middle where like my family has its own kind of culture because of like the experiences they've made over time.
Did you feel like you wanted to stay there when you were in China? Would you feel like, oh, like I finally kind of could see myself like belonging somewhere because of these people really believe I'm from here?
Yeah. To be honest, I did really, really enjoy my experience in Beijing, and I think it was partly because of the expat community. One of my colleagues, he played lacrosse, and he invited me to like play with them. Like I had never played lacrosse until like then, but then I started learning how to play lacrosse, and I got to know like people there, and then like I met like other people through like friends and so on, and suddenly I was in the middle of this like expert community, and everyone in the expert community they kind of know each other, and
Mm,
but like what I loved about it was that most people in that like community they were kind of like an interesting like a blend of like east and west. Like they were either like, for example, Americans who had like studied Chinese for years or like lived in China for like 5 or 10 years, or they were like foreign born Chinese like me, or like they had some other like Western and like Eastern elements to them, like to their personality and interests. And that really made me feel at home because I realized, oh, I'm not the only one who is like in the middle,
mm-hmm.
and it was fun being able to let out like different parts of like my personality, like my cultural identity as well.
That's where the two hearts, right?
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
I gotta ask you this because like you did study this, and like being an analyst at a think tank in Beijing, um, what was your impression or like being like, having worked or interned at the UK civil service and now being in China,
Mhm.
the political situation over there, the system.
Mhm.
Um, any interesting insights from like because everyone knows okay, communist China, whatever, but like anything that you kind of realized or saw that's like counterintuitive or that I wouldn't probably think of or know about.
Mhm. Oh, that's a very good question. I would have to think about that, but I think what I can say is, to be honest, Tony, you would think that me as like someone with like a Chinese family, like with Chinese origins, that I would have like less or like fewer biases towards China. But because I grew up in Germany, I have to admit I actually had my like doubts or like hesitated before I moved to Beijing because I was like, okay, I can improve my Mandarin. Like it's like an interesting opportunity, but like I had like all these like I don't know, like my view of China was not like wow, but like after living there, I just realized that how convenient life is there over there, and how many like biases the the media represents. That is one thing I realized for myself, that I myself had like some biases towards
Mm,
China, for example, that it was much much more modern and than I thought, much more convenient when it comes to their life, and also that it is like, because oftentimes like people have asked me this before, oh, are people there like oppressed, are they like sad, or
cry every day on the street.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But like that's actually not the case. A lot of people there are quite happy, and also like cab drivers, for example, they don't necessarily. Okay, there are a lot of people who are also like against the censorship and so on. But after some time, you get used to it. And on an everyday level, you know, the people you meet on the streets, they don't necessarily care that much about politics to the extent that we do. For them, it's more about the everyday life, and I think that's why like Xi Jinping is so popular among some people, because he improved the economy so significantly, and for people who struggle to make like a living, that is like what they care about. And I think that's also why economic development is such a big focus, or like so important to the government, because it ensures the, you know, support of the people. Yeah.
Do you know the concept of like, and I'm probably not gonna say right, like guangxi or like,
Guangxi, yeah,
yeah, like,
yeah.
you know, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Like,
Yeah.
what is that? I heard it somewhere, and I had it
Yeah.
in some class in university, because we were studying different like political slash economic systems, and
Yeah.
I just remembered about that. And
So in China, a lot of things about personal relationships. It's about not about like what you know about, but about who you know. I'll give you an example. I'm not sure if I should say this, but for example, in like hospitals and so on. I mean, it goes. I mean, it affects like all areas of life, but especially like in business, you don't tend to like, you know, do business first and then form personal relations. You tend to, you know, form like a certain kind of like personal basis, you know, get to know each other over drinks and like dinner and so on. And then, you know, if like, okay, once like we trust each other to a certain extent, then we do business together. Like that's like more like the way it goes in China. And also the example I wanted to give you was also I mean, it depending on who you know, you get like access to better doctors, or like you get through like friends or friends of friends. You know, that's how the system works. It's not like as like rules based or like strict as here, where you can, you know, sometimes it doesn't matter like who you know, like you need to stick to the rules. But there is like more flexible, and if you know certain people, it's easier for you to get access to certain opportunities, and also like yeah, also medical care and so on. For example, because yeah.
that's such a interesting paradox, right? Because people would think like, oh, you have less freedom or whatever. Like the system is very rigid over there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it opens like it seems kind of like it's way more human, because of course you're gonna help out the person who you know, right? Like, and you
Yeah.
can have all these laws and systems and kind of think about like, no, we need to be good law-abiding citizens.
Yeah.
But I think like what I and I now remember a little more about my university course, whatever. It's just like the idea of, yeah, there is the law. It's a guiding, like there are certain guidelines, um, but still like kind of the nature is there, meaning like, okay, I know you,
Mm.
you're having a heart attack, and I'm gonna say, okay, get in line because gotta fix this guy who I have no idea who he is. I mean,
Mm.
it's kind of noble and beautiful,
Mm.
but also shows you that maybe it's like yeah, I think it's the dualism or like the weirdness of it all. Like it seems like a very rigid and hardcore system with like the point system and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yet you still have this relationship thing that's very strong, and I guess family is also a big part of it, right?
Yes, family is super super important in China, and I mean that's what they like when people speak about the differences between East and West. Like a big something that always comes up is how like, you know, Western societies are, or like a lot of them are way more like individualistic or like focus on the individual, whereas in China a lot is about the family, the collective, like about community, um, uh, way more than like here, for example. And yeah, another thing about China is also that the personal and the professional is actually way more intertwined. Like for example, I see like changes here as well, where it's like becoming like more like where the professional is becoming more personal as well. But in China, for example, you don't distinguish between I mean, you do have like groups and so on, but generally speaking, you add everyone on WeChat, right? Like, and it's the equivalent of adding all your business contacts on WhatsApp,
Mm.
basically.
Or
And
like using Slack for like your friends.
exactly, yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean, someone pointed it out at one point, and that is when I realized that that was a big difference as well. But that kind of reflects the Guanxi aspect of it as well, where you know, it's all about like who you know, how well you know them. Yeah.
And I also wanted to ask you, considering like your adventurous nature and wanting to try new things, did you ever get in trouble over there, or did you ever like do something that was like you weren't supposed to do?
Ooh, good question. Yes. I mean, what did I do? Well, there was this. I'm just like thinking. I mean, first of all, you're supposed to register at the police once you arrive, and then like I don't know. I remember there was a situation where I was like, oh, I should probably not say that, but like, when it expires, it's supposed to register again and so on, these kinds of things. But also at like the hospital, one time they were like, oh, we're closed for service, but then like someone like a doctor that studied in Heidelberg. Like I think she liked the fact that I was like from Heidelberg, or she could like relate, and like that's like an example of quantity as well, where she was like, oh, and she only told me, but not the other people. She was like, if you give them 100 yuan, they will do it, just like do it. And then like I actually, I went there and at the doctors, and they were okay, we're closed. And then my aunt went, like a family friend went with us, with me, and then we gave them like 100 yuan. And then like, yeah, then I was treated immediately, like a bit like that, like inside information, when yeah, that is probably something you're not supposed to. But you were probably looking for some big adventure, but I can't think of anything.
No. It's just like, because it's so cool to kind of also, even though some people would say, oh, that's like you shouldn't do that. But I think it teaches you, if you're in that system, it teaches you to like live with other people, because you fucking have to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think like maybe this part of over indexing of like being like, I'm like an individual, strong, powerful, whatever, like in the West, is also putting too much faith in the system. Just like when COVID happened, right? Like everyone freaked the fuck out. Like they didn't know what to do, and then they were like following every governmental like decree, like stay at home, like like lockdown. And it was like, in the end we realized it was dumb, or like to some extent like it didn't make sense, but people just followed like sheep because they believe in the system so much. So I guess that's cool.
But actually that's like another example of this difference between focus on the individual versus focus on the collective, because like this like mass culture, it was present in Asia before the pandemic, where like people who have a cough or like are sick, they naturally like wear like masks, so they wouldn't pass it on to like others out of like consideration for others. So when the pandemic happened and everyone had to wear masks, there was like less resistance, I think, because they were used to it in a way. Because even when and we also wore masks because of the pollution in Beijing, of course. Like I wore masks in Beijing every now and then. Yeah, because sometimes the pollution was like super, super bad, and you were supposed to wear masks, and so everyone had one. But yeah, I like, even when the pollution wasn't that bad, I would sometimes see people wear like masks, and it was because if they were sick, or sometimes because of pollution, yeah, but also whenever they were like sick, like my Chinese friends, they would like wear masks, like some of them.
It's like, yeah.
People don't do that here. They're like, whatever.
Yeah.
But now they do. But back then, I feel like, I mean, I've never seen anyone wear a mask because they had a cough or something, like here in Germany, for example. And I thought it was funny how like some people didn't know how to wear a mask, or they were so annoyed that they had to wear a mask. And I actually think that is quite selfish, to be honest, if you think about it, Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm the best example, and I'm a little bit selfish sometimes, but yeah, I get what you're saying, and like, yeah, it is cool. How, because you're in Beijing and then you come back to the UK, or what happened next? Because why did you decide to leave in the end?
Why did I decide to leave Beijing? So I mean, I worked for the think tank, but then I also worked for a German organization in Beijing. And it was a contract position where I was like an independent consultant. And eventually I thought about like where I wanted to live, and I actually started to miss Europe, my friends and the people, but also like some habits. Like you can't get, like, at least like I couldn't find a good pizza in in like Beijing. And I started to think about it. I very much enjoyed my life in Beijing, but I couldn't see myself like living there in the long run. And I thought, like, okay,
It's a big fucking city, also, right?
It is huge. And I keep telling people how it's like so funny how it was normal for me to travel an hour or 1.5 to see my friends in Beijing, and it was like normal, and I wouldn't even complain. At one point I just got used to it. But like here in Berlin, I try not to travel longer than like 30 minutes, on public transport, because it's like annoying somehow. I don't know why, but
does the city run 24/7? Like, is everything open all the time, and like the subway is going, and because it takes so much?
yeah.
Okay. So you started to miss Europe, which I totally get. Was that when COVID also was starting, or?
No, that was in 2019, so it was before the pandemic started. But yeah, I moved to London and I quit my politics job and also career when shortly before we went into lockdown.
And you started to like learn how to code and like be in like a software engineer.
Yeah.
How? What's the process? Like, how does one even get into that? Like, is it? I mean, obviously it's possible because you made it. But yeah, was it worth it, or how do you even start? Do you go on like Code Academy or?
Yes, actually. I mean, first of all, it was definitely worth it. Second of all, like I actually already started looking into code in Beijing. I think I might have mentioned it to you, but like I once went to this like conference with a lot of like young like entrepreneurs and so on, and that's also where when I got interested in like entrepreneurship, like more interested in entrepreneurship, and also there was this one speaker. She founded her own company, but she also built the website herself, and she casually mentioned the fact that she like taught herself how to code. And also, so she also did like brain art, and I thought it was so cool.
Brain art.
Yeah, I don't know what exactly it entails, but you can look it up. But like, yeah, and that is when I realized, because I had thought about like switching directions before, but like I did not know that you could teach yourself how to code. I mean, I thought I don't know what I thought, to be honest, but at that point I realized like, hey, maybe I can try this, and I started Code Academy. Actually, I joined like a 30-day challenge to learn like a new thing, and I started looking into like a Code Academy, and that's like how I started with like HTML, CSS. Then I came across like Free Code Camp, and like just like kept going, and that's like when I started playing with the thought of like seriously started considering switching careers, because I thought it was so much fun and so much more tangible than like the politics and policy work I'd been doing. And then like in Europe, after trying like the private sector and realize, okay, I think I'm sure that I'm done with like the trying out all kinds of like politics positions. When I quit my job, I actually like I didn't like, it was not my goal to become a software engineer. I wanted to switch into tech because I saw that tech was fast moving and I knew so little about it. I thought it was the future. I went to events, talked to people and so on. I thought it was super cool, but I did not, at that point I did not know yet whether I want to become a software engineer or not. I thought about like, I googled the different options, and I thought about becoming like a product designer, UX UI designer, or like maybe an engineer, front-end engineer, back-end engineer, full stack. I didn't know yet. But then,
what was your routine? Like, did you just wake up, like spend 5 or 6 hours or 8 hours, whatever, like trying to learn how to code? Or did you treat it as like this is my new job, and the job is basically learning what to do and how to do it in order to get a job in tech?
Wow, that's a good question. So first of all, in the beginning, I did not have a routine. So what happened was, I first wanted to go traveling to take a bit of a break, and then start like learning. But then like we were in lockdown, and I was like at home in front of my computer. I was okay, what do I do now?
In Germany or in London or in the UK?
In Germany. So that's when I moved back. And I was thinking to myself, okay, what do I do now? And I started signing up to all these like different like learning platforms, because at the time, right, there were a lot of like offers for like free trials, this and that. And I didn't want to attend a boot camp for various reasons. I didn't really like believe in like paying so much to do something that you can actually do by yourself, or like find like online and so on. And I thought, okay, I'll start like this, let's see how it goes. And yeah, but then after some time I thought like, oh my gosh, so I just did whatever I felt like doing. Like one day I learned like about illustration, another day I learned about like something else. I also started learning JavaScript, watched loads of tutorials and so on. And at one point I realized I was in tutorial hell, which is basically when you've watched so much that you think you know how to do something but you don't actually. Because so I started doing the Odin project as like a open source curriculum for learning how to do full stack development. And like there's like, so all the resources are pulled from the internet, and there are like different sections and so on. And then at the end of like certain sections, there's like a project that you're supposed to do. And I still remember opening, like setting everything up because there are like instructions and so on. And then looking at the editor after having watched like loads and read loads about like JavaScript development and so on. And I thought like, okay, I just need to. So the task was to build like just the front end of the Google homepage, just with HTML and CSS. So not even like involving JavaScript. And
what was the difference? Like,
yeah.
just I don't know what's the difference. Like, so you're only using CSS and HTML.
Yeah.
What does Java add to
JavaScript?
Yeah.
So JavaScript adds like the interactive parts. Like for that, you need like I mean, you don't necessarily need it, but you can also do some like animation and stuff with like CSS, depending how like skilled you are and so on. But JavaScript actually introduced like the logic and like more complex things that you.
Okay, so I can imagine like a very simple website just with text and a few pictures, and that it can be done with HTML/CSS.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Java is like
JavaScript. Yeah.
JavaScript, like changing it. You could change that into like Facebook or like an Instagram, like in terms of like a product, like
yeah,
but like
yeah,
the current websites, like there are videos, there's like shit moving back in the background, and
yeah. If you want to do more complex stuff, you need JavaScript. Yeah, that's correct. But yeah, a simple page with like just pictures or like it's like static, you just need like HTML and CSS. But yeah, I just remember not knowing, like I wasn't sure like how to start, and then like I Googled like the beginning and started, and then I just like started implementing it by myself. And I realized that this, like after having finished it, I can show you later as well.
Yeah.
But someone was like, Jing, you could start like a scam website or something with that. But I was like, yeah. But it was so much fun. And once I sent it to people, and people were like, whoa, how did you do that? And so on. I was like, oh my gosh, I got like such a sense of like achievement from that I continued. And then eventually I also started building stuff with like JavaScript and so on. And it was just so much fun that I got like hooked. And then I put the design stuff to the side and decided, okay, I'm going to become an engineer. And yeah, I reached out to people on LinkedIn, joined all kinds of like Slack group and Discord groups related to coding, built like more projects and so on.
You actually read them? Because like I once did this, so I thought, okay, I'm interested in this topic, and I join every fucking Slack group or Discord group that's out there, and then you're just overwhelmed and you don't even know where to.
So there were certain groups that I checked like more frequently than others, and what I did do is I kept an eye on the jobs channel, because whenever there was a position that interested me, what I would do was, because at that point I had no real clue what you needed to become an engineer or developer, right? Like I mean, online is just like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, another framework, whatnot. But like I would look at the job description like more closely to see what they actually asked for. And yeah, sometimes also reach out to people like startup people that were looking for people, and just talk to them, and that way like I built my own little like pipeline of developing like developer opportunities. And eventually I also found this like job description like for the Klarna position in one of the Slack channels, and I talked to the recruiter. And actually in hindsight I learned that I would probably have been auto rejected by the system if I had submitted my CV online, because I had absolutely no credentials apart from my GitHub projects and my LinkedIn. And yeah, but also, yeah, I mean that was basically it. But later on, like after I got the offer for Klarna, I also got an offer for like this like new free online boot camp. I mean, I got a scholarship for it, like for a new online boot camp, and I tried that as well. But I have to admit that it was, I mean, I suppose it was because it was new, but the people were super lovely, but it was just too much information, like too much, too lecture-like for me. So I think I'm actually glad that that I self-studied, because I could do it at my own pace. I could work on the projects that I wanted to work on and so on. Yeah.
Wait, so you landed the gig at Klarna. You mentioned like you had your LinkedIn and GitHub. What's like, I know
Mm-hmm.
roughly what GitHub is, but you have like a profile over there also? Like every
Mm-hmm.
coder has their own. What is the difference between having a LinkedIn and a GitHub profile?
So it's very different. I mean, LinkedIn is about your career and like your different, and your GitHub, you can like, okay, you can design it the way you want. You can also present your CV there if you want to, but like it's basically about hosting coding projects. So you can look at the code, look at the documentation, and so
So it's
on.
kind of like your Substack or something like this. Like you
Yeah.
basically post like your what you've written and it's there and everyone can check like how proficient and also
Yeah.
how maybe beautiful your code is.
Exactly. So you can have private repos or like repositories, they call them, or like public ones. But exactly, and you can pin some as well to like showcase, your projects. And you also have like free like GitHub like hosting where you can like host it on GitHub as well and so on, and yeah, to show your code and so on. I mean, there's like GitHub. There's also like Bitbucket. There are like different like providers, but GitHub I think is the probably the most well known one.
Got it.
Yeah.
And okay, you landed like at Klarna. You're working there. Klarna is a fintech company.
Mm-hmm.
Did they just like put you day one, say, okay, we believe that you're proficient in
Mm-hmm.
XYZ programming language, and were you part of like a squad?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So the program was called the Klarna Graduate Engineering Program. And
Okay.
yeah, and the funny thing is, like, so I got assigned like a mentor. And she was like super nice. But at one point, I told her, I mean, of course, I got in there. There was so much to learn about the systems, how things are done, and so on. Because I had no idea how like professional developers and like at companies actually work. And there was so much that I had to learn. And obviously, I also experienced like imposter syndrome. And I told my mentor at one point. She's quite funny, but anyways, I told her I was like, Aisa, I have such imposter syndrome. I feel like I don't actually know how to code. And she was like, Ching, it's funny because you think we hired you because we think, I mean, there was a coding challenge and everything, but she was like, we know, like, that you just like started, and so now we know, but we saw your potential, and that, you can like,
Mm.
how much you can learn and whatever. And whatever you knew, at the point of the application, that it was like enough, of a basis to become a developer there. But yeah, they basically started the program with that in mind as well, that there are people, I mean, because even when you come from university, right, with a computer science degree, what do you realistically know about like working in a company like Klarna? You still have to learn about the code base and like how everything works. And so yeah, but I learned like a lot.
Why didn't you
um,
stay there?
hmm?
Why didn't you stay there?
Why didn't I stay there? Well, at one point I couldn't really like, first of all, I really loved the people there. They were super nice, super supportive, and so on. And I learned loads. But at one point, when you reach that point where of diminishing returns, where you feel like you're not learning as many like new things
Mm-hmm.
anymore, I think I could have stayed there and I would still have learned like about like different things. But at one point, like the work did become like more repetitive, and I felt like, and I also couldn't necessarily see myself as a software engineer in the long run, because I'm very much a people's person. It's not a bad thing. Like people kept saying to me, "Ting, you're a unicorn because you are a woman who likes to code but also likes to talk," which is not very common
Yeah.
in the tech world. But I eventually
Go build
realized,
one.
huh?
Go build
Yeah,
one.
exactly. No, but I started missing that like people aspect of it. I mean, it was very communicative as well, but at the end of the day, as a software engineer, you're still judged by the quality of your code, right? And later on, like communication skills also become more important and so on. But I didn't just want to build. I mean, like just code, and also I realized whilst working at Klarna that whilst it was like all interesting and so on, that I missed that feeling I had building things from scratch and being able to own everything from beginning to end. And I realized that that's something that I really loved, being able to decide like the design, everything, like what I'm building, how I'm building it, stumbling, like falling on my face because I don't know how to, learning how to do it, and so on. And I think, I just eventually realized that I just have too many interests, and I think like entrepreneurship is a great place for that, where you have to learn everything on the go, or not everything, but like a lot of things, where you can wear many hats and make a real impact. And that's that's how.
Yeah. What do you want to build?
What do I want to build? Very good question. A unicorn. No, but, so as part of the program, I mean, Tony, you know it. I'm not sure how much you've told your listeners.
It's called Entrepreneur First. We were both there, and that's how we met.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, I've tested like different ideas and like co-founder relationships as a part of the program now. But what I've realized for myself is I'm not really like, what's important to me is that whatever I build, I want it to have an impact on people's lives, like the feeling that I'm contributing directly in some way to people's like well-being, whether it comes to like personal health or well-being or productivity or like learning and education. That's like something that really excites me. I haven't found that like the one thing yet where I'm like, okay, I'm definitely gonna go like in there. But I realized for myself that this like connection to people is very important. Because as I think probably mentioned to you at one point, like with one of the potential co-founders, we went into we started out with software companies in highly regulated industries, and eventually our customer discovery calls, they steered us in the direction of like manufacturing, like quality control for manufacturing. But then I realized, okay, it's not a topic I'm super excited about or excited about enough to want to build a company in it, because I was missing that like direct connection to the people. People and like community and so on, and learning education is like, those are like topics that really interest me. I mean, I know it's like very broad, but at least I've learned for myself that I think with like the kind, like thinking about the kind of things that motivate me, like it's more suited for like B2C, for example, than like B2B. That's a realization I've made over the past couple of years. I thought I could do with like B2B SaaS or something, but like probably not gonna be that.
And do you feel like there's no going back, or like you really want to commit yourself just to building something on your own or slash with someone, but building and versus just joining an incredible organization that could stimulate you in the ways that you want to be stimulated, or like provide you the opportunities that you're looking for, whilst being an employee?
I mean, I have thought about it, but I really want to start something of my own. I like that ownership, the challenge, the impact, and so on, that I see like the potential. And also I realized that in the politics and policy world, there weren't that many people that really inspired me, where I said like, oh wow, But I often had that feeling when I talked to entrepreneurs or like self-made people, and I just realized that that's like who I want to become, like going back to the beginning, right? Because I really admire entrepreneurs for some reason. I mean, not everyone to the same extent, of course, but like I do like tend to admire more like entrepreneurs than I do like, for example, policy people for some reason. And I think that tells you something about like what I value and what I look up to or appreciate. And so for that reason, I want to try. And even if I fall on my face, I feel like I will learn so much more by trying than I will by like joining another company, even if it's a incredible startup or something. And also I also like the fact, I mean, I don't like the fact, but I'm actually quite tired of I have to say, of these like pictures everywhere of the I mean, people joke about it, about like 3 men, like the startup people, like these pictures, and I like, that's not I mean, it's another thing, but I'm like, oh, I'm tired of this kind of world. I want to see like more women and more like diversity in the tech sector, and in the entrepreneurship community or so. But yeah, that's also something
You
that
talked to
motivates me.
Georgia.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, we've talked about it, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good luck then. Any female founders out there looking for a co-founder? Jing is your girl.
I mean, it doesn't mean that I have to pair up with a female founder, right? But it does mean that I want to start my
True.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I asked this parting question. What is your advice for people out there, or for me, for yourself? I don't know. Your life philosophy.
Well, I would say just do it. I think that life is too short not do like whatever makes you happy or whatever you really believe in. It really is too short not to. So just do it. Go for it. I mean, we think that we have like sometimes people are afraid that they have a lot to lose and so on. But what do you realistically have to lose, especially at this stage? You know, like I don't think you have anything to lose. There's always something to fall back on. Jobs will always be there. And when it comes to finances, you can get financial support and so on. I mean, there's so many different ways. And I think that's also part of entrepreneurship, right? To think about like solutions or find solutions that might not be obvious. But like when it comes down to it, I think the risk of like ending up like, you know, in your 80s or whatever and looking back, realizing, oh, you didn't do the things that you really wanted to do because of fear of like losing like your reputation or like of what other people think, it's like too, I mean, that for me is like way higher than like the risk of like trying and like perhaps like failing, because at least then you will have done it. And honestly, I think I've said that to you before, but at the end of the day, like no one is going to remember your life as well as you do. And so that's why you should live it your way. So yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.